4th and 3rd of August. May I remind members this meeting is being broadcasted and recorded, and to switch off your mobile devices to silent. After speaking, can you please ensure you turn off your microphones? The location of the fire exits are here and there, and the assembly point is by the bandstand. You might be interested to know, ladies and gentlemen, that Roy Cornell sends his best wishes and hopes to be with us soon at the meetings. Can we send our best wishes? Yes, I think we shall. Can we minute that, please? Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Yep, we have apologies from Councillors Stuart Ritchie and Louise Potter, and both Andrew Baldwin and Billy Greening have said they may be a bit late tonight.
Roy Cornell, obviously. Yeah. To approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July. Is that approved? Great. Thank you. Declarations of any members' interests. Any declarations? Yes, Councillor Donnelly.
I don't believe it's prejudicial, but I should probably say it for item 6. I was Vice Chairman and Director of Saxon Weald yonks ago.
Okay, thank you. Is that noted? Thank you. Sorry.
I should declare a similar interest. I was a member of Saxon Weald Board years ago as well.
Okay, thank you. Appeals are for noting, and the first item on the agenda. I think Councillor would like to say. So, right, okay, thank you. Anybody else? Director of Saxon Weald? The first item on the agenda is DC 20-2578, the Cobblers, Hayes Lane, Slimfield. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, good evening members. There is an addendum to this application which you'll be aware of. It deals with the revised National Planning Policy Framework, and in regard to this agenda item, there's just a change to paragraph 109, which is now 111 for July in PPF version. In terms of the specifics of this agenda item, the addendum also provides updated figures for the Council's housing register. The number of the applicants over the age of 55 wanting to live in Slimfold is now much lower than the 65 figure provided in February, you'll note. Also reported is the Scout Hut parking strategy and an updated Highway Authority consultation. And then the negotiated solution makes sure the Scout Hut would be suitably accessed for its immediate servicing and parking needs. And you'll note the Highway Authority is satisfied, raising no objection. So I'll move to the main presentation. So, as you'll note from the report, this is a hybrid application for the demolition of existing retirement scheme and the construction of 12 flats with car park and replacement Scout Hut. The proposed residential scheme consists of 8 one-bedroom and 4 two-bedroom flats, and that's for full planning. And the replacement Scout Hut element is outlined. This slide on display shows the site location, which is central in the built environment of the village of Slimfold at the north end of Haynes Lane, and it's adjacent to the southern edge of Slimfold Conservation Area, which is shown shaded green. Just moving to this slide, these are photographs of the existing residential scheme, which is of its time, and the Council's Conservation Officer welcomes its replacement. Also shown is the existing access of Haynes Lane, which will be unchanged. This slide shows pictures of the existing residential scheme, the existing car park serving the existing residential scheme. Photo A shows the existing access off Greenfield Road, and that's also unchanged. Photograph B shows the pumping station, which is just off site. Photograph C shows the existing garage block to be demolished, and D shows the turning area and the orientation of the existing blocks to the car park, and that lacks natural surveillance. On this slide are photographs of the existing Scout Hut and its associated outdoor space. So in the proposal for you, this land is set aside for the future delivery of the Scout Hut and its associated storage space at reserve matters. This last photograph slide is of the existing development in relation to some neighbours that are most impacted upon. The top photograph shows the boundary screening to Cedars, which is a property to the south, and also shown are the communal areas of the existing flats, and these don't benefit from private garden. So just moving to the detail of the scheme, this is the proposed site plan. The red line is phase 1, which is the full permission for the proposed residential scheme. The blue line is the land set aside for the Scout Hut to be delivered at reserve matters. What you'll notice is the position of the new residential blocks is roughly aligned with the existing scheme, shown dotted in red, and with overlooked car parking alongside. The ground floor flats, they will benefit from private courtyard gardens. All the flats will be future-proofed to allow for older person occupation. All trees on the site will be retained and protected during build-out, except the one, which is where my cursor is. That's a category U specimen, so has been identified to be removed irrespective of development because of its poor quality. The car park to the east is to be rationalised, so with the existing garages removed and replaced with surface bays, and these will serve the new residential scheme. Plus, Saxon Weald have agreed to the Scouts' use of the 2 visitor bays through the visitor permit scheme, and that's where my cursor is, these 2 bays. As officers, this is a betterment to the existing Scout lease arrangements, which will be preserved. And also there's future possible spaces alongside the Scout Hut under reserve matters, this area where my cursor is. So these are some elevations of the scheme, which as officers we feel are acceptable contemporary design approach. The Council's Conservation Officer is satisfied with the materials and finishes, especially in regard to the impact on the setting of the conservation area. The middle drawing shows the proposed building scale is comparable to the existing. See where my cursor is, that's the existing ridge, and just below is the existing eaves. So the eaves are the same height, and the overall ridge of the new building will be roughly 1.4 metres higher when viewed from Haynes Lane. The increase in the ridge is less pronounced to elevations that face the neighbours. And for that reason, as well as building orientations and the separation distances, mean that we feel that there's no unacceptable overbearing or overshadowing. And you can see on this elevation where my, where my cursor is, the attempt is to minimise first floor window openings which face south onto Cedars as well. So we don't believe they'll be intrusive overlooking. This slide details out Slimfield Neighbourhood Plan Policy 10, and for the reasons in the report and also as I've presented as officers, we think the proposal is consistent and compliant with criteria 1, 2 and 4. Turning to criteria 5, through reserve matters, the Scouts will have 5 years by which to submit their plans for the Scout Hut. The footprint of the hut shown on the drawings has been agreed by the Scouts chairman, and policy 10 doesn't apply to Saxon Weald to build the Scout Hut. So taking all those factors together, we believe there's sufficient compliance with criteria 5. Regarding criteria 3, this requires a housing mix of the site that caters for current and future households with a focus on the elderly. So we acknowledge the scheme put forward is not age restricted to the over 55s. However, we've negotiated a tailor package for the occupation of the accommodation, and that's been negotiated by planning officers and the housing officers of the council with Saxon Weald, and we feel that's considered compliant with criteria 3. So just the details of that tailored package are on the screen. So the building fabric of the blocks allows for lifetime living, and there's a prioritisation of first let that's secured through the 106 for over 55s, and that has a local connection before it cascades out to other age groups. So those updated figures from the council's housing team in the addendum show that there are only 13 over the age of 15 residents on the waiting list who have a preferred area of choice at Slimfield, and of those, only 3 over 55s have a specified local connection. So I think that's demonstrative of the level of need and why we feel that we've got a compromise where we capture those residents and that identified local need, but equally we allow for a cascade out to other age groups and other people on the housing register. So in conclusion, taken as a whole, given the benefit of this offer of 100% affordable rent accommodation that carries significant weight, we feel that those benefits outweigh the shortfall in the absence of the age restriction limitation being provided. And that's why the application is recommended for approval as set out in the officer report and the addendum.
Thank you. Can the first speaker please take a seat? Nathaniel King-Smith. You have 2 minutes, Mr. King-Smith.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors, for the opportunity to speak at tonight's committee. I represent MH Architects Limited and I'm the architect for this application. The submitted proposal you're considering tonight has benefited from discussions with the parish, local scout group and your officers. This has involved a number of changes to the original proposals. We're pleased to say that your officers fully support this scheme, and we sincerely hope that you too are able to support your officers' recommendation for approval. I'd like to take a moment just to highlight some of the aspects that we as a design team addressed during the development of these proposals. On the Scout Hut, we've listened to previous comments about the area, including the area of land housing the current Scout Hut, and I'm undertaking consultation with the Scouts to allow for an outline proposal for the reprovision of the Scout Hut when they have funding. This also includes the resurfacing of the accessway and the parking area. On accessibility, we have taken on board the comments relating to allowing for the homes to be of increased accessibility for those as they get older. As a result, we have amended the design to provide compliance with M42 building standards. These standards provide wider corridors and doorways and larger bathrooms, amongst other things. On design and landscaping, we have sought to address it and accommodate comments received from the officers and have enhanced the amount of landscaping and amended the extent of elevational materials. In conclusion, I'd like to just outline a few of the positive aspects of this scheme. This represents an efficient use of previously developed land that will deliver much needed affordable accommodation. This brownfield site is already in residential use and is in a highly sustainable location near to the village centre and integrated into the community. We've sought to integrate the parish council comments by widening the site to include the Scout Hut and providing M42 homes. Detailed highways design and consultation has been carried out, with West Sussex County Council raising no objection, and also the car parking providers in excess of the County Council standards. The proposed building's energy demands...
You've had your 2 minutes, Mr. King-Smith. Can you summarise, please?
Sure. Will be lowered by adopting a fabric-first approach to sustainability with no gas to be used on the site. Finally, the scheme has been developed in close liaison, and we really hope that you can support your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the next speaker, Francesca Wilson, please take a seat?
Dear Chairperson and members of the Planning Committee, my name is Francesca Wilson and I'm the New Business Project Manager at Saxon Weald, a Horsham-based housing association that manages over 5,200 homes in the Horsham district. When completed, this scheme will deliver 100% affordable housing and comprise of 12 one- and two-bed flats. This exceeds the affordable quota required by planning policy. These homes will also replace older bedsit accommodation with sustainable new homes, which will be built to a specification exceeding current building regulation requirements, have a focus on significantly reducing carbon emissions, and will meet the national space standards. These homes will also provide 23 parking spaces, which include 2 retained spaces for Stone Cottages residents. The proposal addresses the criteria set out in Policy 10 of the Slimfield Parish Council Neighbourhood Plan by prioritising over 55s with a local connection on the housing register for the initial tenancies, ensuring that all homes are built to M42 standard, demonstrating that they are adaptable and accessible, ensuring that there are wet floor showers in the 4 ground floor 1-bed flats, providing ease of access for elderly residents, and by including outline planning permission for a replacement scout hut. There are currently 165 applicants in housing need, identifying Slimfield as an area of choice. Of these, 13 have a declared local connection to the area, and of these, only 3 applicants are over 55. By cascading nominations and not solely restricting lets to over 55s, this scheme provides an excellent opportunity to meet local housing need. We have worked closely with Slimfield Parish Council, Horsham District Council and the Chairman of the Scouts throughout this process, and extensive public consultations have been conducted. Where possible, we have incorporated feedback into the current design. In summary, this project will deliver high-quality, sustainable new homes, all for affordable rent, and we ask that the committee supports the officer's recommendation and approves this application.
Thank you. And Councillor Christopher Leyland from Slimfield Parish Council. Councillor Leyland, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Chris Lyons, Chair of Planning, Slimfield Parish Council. As per the Slimfield Neighbourhood Plan, the Parish Council supports the principle of development on the Cobbler's site. The Parish Council also gratefully acknowledges the outline planning application for replacement scout hut. However, the Parish Council cannot support the current proposal for the following reasons. The development at the Cobblers has always been an important part of the village. The intention of the Slimfield Neighbourhood Plan was to upgrade the existing 17 highly valued units.
Mr. Leyland, I'm sorry, difficult to hear. Can you bring your microphone
Sorry.
closer and lower your papers? Thank you.
The development of the Cobblers has always been an important part of the village. The intention of the Slimfield Neighbourhood Plan was to upgrade the existing 17 highly valued units for the elderly. Indeed, the existing residents were promised that they would be able to return once the development had been completed. Relevant points in the Slimfield Neighbourhood Plan, Policy 10, state the following. Residential development of the Cobblers will be supported where proposals facilitate the upgrade or replacement of the existing 17 units. Proposals demonstrate that special regard has been had to preserving and enhancing the character of the adjacent conservation area. A suitable mix of dwelling types and
Sorry, you do need to speak louder. I can barely hear you.
I'm sorry. A suitable mix of dwelling types and sizes to meet the current and future households is provided with a focus on the elderly. Proposals include a replacement scout hut if no alternative provision can be made elsewhere. In the view of the planning officer, there is a limited compliance with the Slimfield Neighbourhood Policy 10, which states accommodation with a focus on the elderly. The provision here is for affordable housing only. This provision is already being delivered via other schemes in the village, and only the Cobblers has the unique location close to the village amenities and transport links. We would like to highlight the relevant sections from the draft HDC local plan. These are Section 6.2 talks about the ageing population and the Horsham district, where it is estimated that 30% of residents will be 65 plus by 2039. It states, therefore, important that housing provision meets the needs of the older population. Under need 6.29, it states there is particular need to meet the housing needs of an increasingly elderly population and continuing need to provide homes for specialist needs. Policy 6.5719 says, the policy sets criteria to ensure that such developments are not only in the most suitable location, close to shops and amenities, but also accessible for those with impaired mobility. Proximity to service within walking distance on bus routes is therefore important. The plan clearly articulates the growing need for the type of accommodation envisaged and agreed in the Slingfield neighbourhood plan. The Parish Council sees no need to restrict the scheme to residents of Slingfield, merely offer residents first choice before opening out to those over 55 on the HTC housing register. We believe that HTC housing have just updated the housing demand figures. If the demand for the over 55s with a local connection isn't currently there, we would like to see a condition of occupation that still gives this age range priority, especially given the demand detailed in the local plan. In summary, Slingfield had a much valued, vibrant and integrated as part of the Slingfield community, fully utilised scheme for the elderly with 17 units supporting 21 residents. The current proposal means that this will be lost. There is also a growing need for this type of accommodation as detailed in the draft local plan. The Slingfield neighbourhood plan intended for the existing provision to be upgraded and offered to a similar age range. The current proposal does not facilitate this, and for that reason, the Parish Council cannot support the application in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the officer now before I ask the local member to speak. No? Okay. Councillor Tricia-Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. I do understand the concerns and issues that Parish Councillor Leyland has raised, and it is most unfortunate that the intention behind their neighbourhood plan was that Saxon Weald would provide social housing for over 55s, as was the old cobblers. However, this was not actually stated, but it is important to realise that after I had spoken to officers about this point, Saxon Weald would not have agreed to this. So consequently, that's most unfortunate. The people on Horsham Housing District Register with a connection to Slimfield and are over 55 will be given first refusal. And then the houses will be offered to people who have expressed a wish to live in Slimfield. The Scouts have been given 5 years to try and raise money to facilitate a new Scout hut. And they actually have now been given a couple of parking permits or preferential parking for the Scoutmaster and other people. I am very reluctant not to support my parish council because I do understand their concerns, but I'd be interested to know what members feel about this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Councillor Vickers, are you? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, on the face of it, it all looks wonderful. I understand the Slingfield villagers who grow old and they really do need, if they want to stay in that area, perhaps they do need more. It's a very difficult balance. I mean, we certainly need this affordable housing, and it does look as if it could be very useful indeed, but we must look very closely at the Slimfield councillors' council's objections to it. I mean, I also want to just draw attention. I know it's under reserved matters and it's in the future, but we have the Scout hut that is going to be put there, which is a wonderful amenity for the village. But that has to be done extremely carefully because I have had experience since I've been on this council of a Scout huts that went up and caused enormous problems to local residents. So there has to be a huge look at that with noise abatement and all that kind of thing. I'm going to listen to what everyone else says, but I am concerned that the village itself, the council, is not as satisfied as I would have hoped it could have been.
Thank you. Councillor Claire Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you say, there's a dichotomy here between wanting to provide affordable housing, which I'm sure we all agree is needed, and the concerns of the parish council, who wanted to see the older persons accommodation replaced with like for like. However, I think the officers have made it very clear that policy-wise this complies with everything that we need to look at that's in the MPPF. I just want to ask a question. Will there be enough spaces for the Scout Hut going forward, especially if the new building has larger capacity? That was my only question, but I think on balance I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Yep, so on those points about the Scout Hut, yes, we do need to consider amenity and potentially how conflict could be mitigated if the Scout Hut building is put in place and operated. That would all be through the reserve matters, and I know it's a future date, but the security is through at that point to consider those issues. Obviously, it depends on how they design the building, but I imagine looking at the drawing on display, most of the comings and goings would be focused at the front, particularly this area of space here. If there's going to be kids congregating before activities, it's most likely to be here rather than just north where the residential is. But there's opportunity to a reserve matters negotiate window positions where the plant goes to avoid any noise from that, and also to control more generally operations and how the times that people can use the Scout Hut. Obviously being reflective of the fact there's an existing Scout Hut there already, which has freedom and is uncurtailed about how they can use it. So those are all issues for reserve matters. In terms of the parking, what we've got is a betterment on the existing lease situation. So at the moment, the lease allows, if you follow my cursor, them access the Scouts, that is, along here and allow circulation space at the front. What is shown here in terms of the footprint has been agreed by the chairman of the Scouts as appropriate. So it actually releases this area of white here for additional parking. That can be something that the Scouts themselves decide what's most appropriate to serve their needs at the reserve matter stage. So there's an opportunity there for the minibus to be parked and for pick up and drop off, which is the majority of the activities that we associate with the parking. In terms of the visitor spaces here, they don't exist at the moment, so that's 2 extra spaces for the Scouts. We imagine that will be used for staff or people doing evening classes, guest speakers and such like. So although on the face of it, it looks quite a constrained site and it probably doesn't provide for a very large car park, we have to look at what the existing provision is, and what we are gaining here is a betterment upon that and no detriment to what's already provided. Just going back to the parish's comments about the accommodation, just bringing up this kind of bespoke package that we've been able to negotiate. Now, obviously, we've been able to make sure that the building fabric is fit for purpose, and as the speaker for Saxon Weald went through, there are various ways in which the rooms have been fitted out to allow for that. So what's been presented isn't just affordable accommodation, it is bespoke accommodation in the fact that efforts have been made to provide for M42 standard, which is lifetime homes equivalent. And we have got this first refusal. So that's important to recognise that it doesn't prohibit other people who are aged 55 from applying. So I think the fact that we have that first refusal there is a bespoke offer here. It's not just a choice between affordable housing per se or a bespoke elderly accommodation. We've married the two, perhaps not as extensively as the parish would wish, but we have got a middle ground here, so I think that's important to recognise. I don't know if Adrian wanted to say anything.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, does that answer your questions? Thank you. Councillor Colin Minto.
Thank you, Chair. And just a quick question about the historic residents. I'm sorry if I've got any confusion here, but I picked up that there was a expectation that they might be able to return at some point, and it didn't sound like that was practical. So any extra words on that? And you know, is that practical or not? Or
I think that's a case of unfortunate Chinese whispers. We're not aware of it, and whatever the debates around it, they are not for planning to consider. We're looking at it on the basis of what's been put forward. So I recognise that there's an awareness and a concern about that issue, but unfortunately it's not for planning to give it regard to. I think Councillor Utan spoke on that point as well.
Do you wish to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, I mean, it might not be for planning, but from a moral perspective, I'd be interested to know if there is an expectation that people can return. Has that been catered for in other conversations in other parts of the council? Because it would be trifle unfair if their expectation was to come back and it's now not going to be satisfied.
I'm sorry, I have to say that this is not a planning matter, and therefore we cannot really debate this. Good point, but unfortunately not relevant. Sure. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you very much. 2 points. So the first one is about the conditions for older people. There seems to be a bit of contradiction in the argument. So on the one hand, we're hearing that Saxon Weald couldn't accept having an ongoing prioritisation for older people there, which would rather suggest that they felt that there would be too many older people that would squeeze out other more deserving residents or whatever. And on the other hand, that we don't need to have an ongoing prioritisation for older people because there aren't very many of them. So which is it? You know, are there not enough older people to justify it, or are there so many that they're causing a problem? So that's really my question. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. The second thing is on the plan with the layout of the car park. I'm just querying how effective this layout's going to be, because the car parking is away from the houses and the scout hut, which is good in the sense that, you know, people congregating in front of the scout hut or during scout meetings might be able to sort of play outside and so on. But will that actually work, or will people end up parking up towards the top of the car park in what's meant to be the turning circle, and causing problems? I think there might be better ways of laying the car park out that would be more self-enforcing than this one is.
Yeah, in terms of the car park, part of the layout is a result of the lease requirements. So the scouts are only allowed to access certain parts of the car park, and that in itself would be a management control about how they could enter into the turning area. I mean, we do have a condition put on, and as part of the reserve matters, we will be looking at how the parking strategy can operate without conflict. It may well be that some discussions with the Scouts and Saxon Weald further down the road will allow both parties to recognise that at some point there would be some need for, say, on a busy Scout evening, for someone in high vis, for Scouts to go out and just make sure that people are behaving in terms of the drop-off and pick-up. Having said all that, it does operate as it is at the moment, and there is that turning space there. So a lot of the considerations that we have to give are on the fallback position of, well, how does it operate now? Most parties will recognise if there's problems and let each other know, and that probably feed into the car parking strategy through the condition. So I think there's enough awareness from the Scouts, but also Saxon Weald, about how to make sure that is managed correctly themselves and quite self-regulated. The point about the affordable and this issue about elderly accommodation. I've almost forgotten what the first part of the question was. Perhaps you could help me.
Well, effectively, if there aren't very many people who want, elderly people who want this accommodation, then why is it going to be a big problem to give them an ongoing priority and accommodate them first and then other ages second?
Yeah, thanks for the prompt. So the housing model that's been put forward is affordable rent. So the occupation is primarily determined by those on our housing need register. So other housing models like market housing and social rent could possibly capture that wider need, perhaps from the district about downsizers and elderly accommodation. But the point is that this is, as it's 100% affordable rent, is very much determined by who is on our register and the need that's been identified through that. So that's a driver to who will be able to occupy the units.
Thank you. I've got 3 more speakers and then I'm going to end it because I think by then we'll have covered every section of this. Right, Councillor Tony Bradnam.
Now, John, I just wanted to ask about the definition of older people aged 55. Is that our definition or is that a national definition? Because it seemed to me to be bonkers to be talking about people being older people at 55. I mean, most people in that age group are saving up to climb Everest or something. I mean, it just...
Yeah, a lot of people are very spirited in 55. It's the industry standard. It's what's recognised and used elsewhere on different housing models.
Oh, thank you. So it's not our definition.
Councillor Lynn Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Councillor Bradnam, over 55s are designated by Age UK as older people. Just to alleviate your worries. No. Whilst I have sympathy with the parish council, I fully support the officers in this. We have 100% N42 bespoke accommodation, which is also 100% affordable. I will be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert. And the last speaker is, before I come back to the local member, is Councillor Brian Donnelly.
Thank you, Chairman. I was reading the agenda item, the updated figures that the officer sent out to us, was it today? I may have missed it, but I was certainly on a working group of the councils many years ago when we sorted out who was eligible for housing in Horsham, because many years ago we had a huge backlog. I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds, because of course we had opened up it to the whole country. And as I remembered, we were basically not going to take anybody from us with no firm Horsham protocol or credentials. And so seeing in here that anyone wishing to join the housing register must have a general connection to the district, usually having lived here for the last 2 years. So I just bring this up as a general point, and then it says on permanent employment. Now we had huge problems, and then you go back into 165 applicants have Slimfield as a preferred area. I mean, that's a huge number for one little place, if I make use of that. So I'd like to, via your good officers, ask the cabinet member for strategic planning perhaps to look into that, because as I understood it, yonks ago, we did change the protocol because we have been swamped by requests from outside. And I'm just wondering if that's perhaps happening again, because that's a very easy method of getting onto our housing list. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure the Cabinet member will get back to you in writing, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Utan.
Yes, thank you. I've obviously listened to what everybody has to say, and I think that reluctant as I am, I think I'll support the officer's recommendation. I don't like being at odds with my parish council, but I actually think that we have no choice in this matter. I would just like to add that I did query, and I don't know whether it's come up or not, but I did say, what about disabled access? And I understand that some of the units are actually going to be future-proofed for any potential disabled requirement, which is actually quite quite a valuable asset, really. So I just thought I'd add that. Thank you.
The recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and completion of a Section 106 legal agreement. All those in favour of this recommendation, please raise your hands. And those against? And any abstentions? Councillor Greening, I know the reason as you came into the meeting halfway through. Thank you. Right, this has been carried. The recommendation has been approved. Thank you very much. Agenda item 7, DC 210685, Holly Farm, Winterpit Lane, Mannings Heath. And we're going to swap the officers for the recommendation. Just a few minutes before the meeting commences. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So this application 0685 is Holly Farm, Winterpit Lane, Mannings Heath, West Sussex. Similar to the previous application that you've just heard, it's noted that the MPPF has been updated since the publishing of this report. In terms of this application, is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. With regards to this application, your attention is drawn to paragraph 6.12 of the report, which refers to paragraph 127 of the MPPF. This has been updated and is now paragraph 130. The wording is exactly the same, so there are not considered to be any material changes which would alter the recommendation today. So the application site comprises a parcel of land measuring approximately 0.3 hectares to the south of Winterpit Lane within the built-up area boundary of Mannings Heath. And just to give some context, this is located at the far end of the built-up area of Mannings Heath. The site includes dilapidated farm buildings and areas of trees and bushes. Open fields lie adjacent to the site to the west, with detached houses to the north and east. The site is adjacent to a row of former farm and commercial buildings that have now and since been converted to a residential dwelling known as Hathaways to the east, located just here. Looking at the wider context, Mannings Heath generally comprises a mixture of two-storey dwellings and bungalows. The residential form is interspersed with mature vegetation and trees, and the surrounding properties occupy reasonably generous plots. There is no dominant style of property with a variety of characterful properties present. The application before you seeks planning permission for 5 detached residential dwellings with associated landscaping, parking and access, following the demolition of the existing farm buildings on site. The properties would have varying external finishes, including red facing brickwork, clay hanging tiles, and red clay roof tiles with projecting timber tiled entrance canopies, and traditional white cottage UPVC windows. Plots 1 and 2, just located to the northeastern side area of the site, consists of 2 and 3 bed properties respectively. Plots 4 and 5, located to the northwest of the site, would consist of 3 bed properties, and the remaining plot 3, consists of a 4 bed chalet bungalow, which would be located at the southern end of the site. The site is allocated for residential development within the Maid Nuthurst neighbourhood plan, and the allocation site forms policy 3 of the neighbourhood plan. The policy states that built development is limited to the area consisting of the derelict barns and shrubs, and does not extend beyond the rear building line of the adjacent property to the east. So that is with reference to plot 3 at the bottom of the site there, and in reference to Hathaways. So it's quite clear there that the building does not extend beyond the southern end of that neighbouring property. The proposed development would adhere to this, and in addition, all of the built form will be located wholly within the built up area boundary. And it's quite vague there, but you can just see it dotted along the western side of the site there. Furthermore, the policy requires that the scheme comprises primarily 2 and 3 bed semi-detached and detached houses. 4 out of the 5 dwellings proposed are for 2 and 3 bed properties, which are detached, so the proposal would adhere to this part of policy 3 of the neighbourhood plan. The principle is therefore considered to be acceptable in this location. So just moving through, just to give some idea of the designs. So overall, the proposals are considered to be acceptable in design terms, representing an appropriate form of development on this site, and acceptable in terms of the quantum and the number of properties to be proposed. So these are plots 1 and 2, plots 4 and 5, and plot 3 at the southern end. And these are just some photos of the site. The proposed dwellings will be located at acceptable distance away from neighbouring properties to ensure that there's no detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity, and there will also be acceptable quality level of environment created for future occupiers of the dwellings. The proposals will provide sufficient off-site parking following consultation with West Sussex Highways. The majority of the soft boundary treatments to the site frontage would be retained, with additional planting also proposed, which would be controlled and considered through an appropriate landscaping condition This is also part of the neighbourhood plan policy. It's a requirement within that, and that's going to be provided, which we will control through a condition. Overall, the application is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in your report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers. The first one is Dr. Chris Lyons. Welcome back, Dr. Lyons. You have 2 minutes, but then you know that.
Good evening, members. My name is Dr. Chris Lyons and I'm a director at Tetra Tech Planning Consultancy, and I'm speaking on behalf of Concept Developments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I would like to start by thanking the planning officer for efficient handling of the planning application and for writing such a thorough report that addresses all of the issues. Since the previous application was refused, I was asked by the client to help to resolve the concerns raised. We've now designed a scheme that we believe addresses each of the previous reasons for refusal. We met virtually with the parish council to explain the scheme, and we believe the comments they've made can also be resolved. Taking the 3 issues from the previous decision notice in turn, I want to briefly address each point. The first issue is the concern that the dwellings would not be 2 and 3 bedroom properties, as there were additional rooms that could have been converted into additional bedrooms. The scheme in front of you tonight has been designed so there are no additional rooms that could be easily converted or subdivided to create additional bedrooms. The scheme therefore provides dwellings that are mainly 2 or 3 bedrooms as required by the neighbourhood plan. The second issue is the potential impact on Hathaways and the possible loss of light and outlook. We've redesigned the scheme so instead of a 2-storey dwelling 3.7 metres from the wall of Hathaways, there's now a chalet bungalow 8.25 metres away from the dwelling. This is considerably further than any standards requirements, and we believe addresses this issue as well. The third issue in the previous scheme was that part of the development encroached on the built-up area boundaries. A small part of one of the houses and some of the parking was located within the built-up area boundary line. The scheme now has no physical development within the built-up area boundary line, and we note a condition has been added to ensure permitted development rights are removed to ensure this remains the case. We trust we've addressed the previous reasons for refusal in a positive way, and the scheme before you meets all of the requirements of the neighbourhood plan, the local plan, and we note all consultees are satisfied with the proposal, and I trust you will support the scheme. Thank you.
Bang on. Thank you very much. Councillor Owen Hydes, Nuthurst Parish Council. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Hydes.
Thank you, Chairman. I assure you I won't take anything like 5 minutes. But good evening, councillors. The Parish Council is very pleased to support this application since it now complies with our neighbourhood plan. This application will provide the parish with 5 small houses. However, the Parish Council would like to see 2 important conditions placed on this development. Firstly, it would like a condition to remove permitted development rights. The Parish Council would like to see these houses remain small and inexpensive so that first-time buyers can actually afford to live in our parish. This is an important issue for us, keeping our small houses small. Within a few months of people moving into another small neighbourhood plan houses at Vaughan Copse in Mannings Heath, we received an application to enlarge one of them. This is not what we want. So please, a condition removing permitted development rights would be extremely helpful. Secondly, the Parish Council would like a condition preventing street lighting in this small cul-de-sac off Winterpit Lane. There is no street lighting in Winterpit Lane itself, and none in the small close immediately opposite this proposed development. This site is just a small field away from woodland that is home to owls and many other species of wildlife, and street lighting would simply not be right in this location. Another point I'd like to make is that residents and visitors to the site should be required to park within the site and not on Winterpit Lane, which is very narrow. Parking on Winterpit Lane would result in the verges being chewed up. So, in summary, the Parish Council supports this application since it complies with the neighbourhood plan, we would just like 2 conditions. One, the removal of permitted development rights, and secondly, no street lighting. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the officer for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of permitted development rights, they have been removed. Condition 19 on the report removes nearly all permitted development rights to the properties. That includes extensions, any alterations to the roofs, any outbuildings. So that condition would have to be complied with. So any if the potential future residents of those properties were to wish to extend their properties, they would have to apply for planning permission. They wouldn't be able to do that without permission. In terms of lighting, I draw members' attention to condition 8, which is details of hard and soft landscaping, where we've also included details of all external lighting. So that will be considered prior to occupation of the dwellings, and that will be in conjunction with our landscape architect, obviously taking into account the location and the context of the site and surroundings. I would also note that we have a condition relating to biodiversity lighting as well, because we're conscious of the ecology aspects of the site. So that would also be submitted prior to the occupation of the site. And just in terms of parking, like I mentioned earlier, a note to members, West Sussex have been consulted on the parking provision for the proposal before us. The parking provision is considered to be acceptable. Unfortunately, we can't control anything that's outside of the red line area in terms of people parking on the public highway, which essentially Winterspeak Road is. So I understand that it's a narrow road, but the planning laws in front of us and the provisions that we have wouldn't be able to prohibit someone parking on Winterspeak Lane, unfortunately. But in terms of the parking provision on site, that is considered to be acceptable for this scheme before us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to go to the local member, Councillor Tony Bradman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Like Mr. Hydes, I think overall the scheme is a good one, and of course it does comply with the neighbourhood plan. And thank you for the report from our officers, and thank you for the removing permitted development rights, because I think that is a concern with them being smaller properties. You know, you do get people who move into somewhere and just think, all right, we're double the size of this overnight, and off they go. So happy with that. I do note there's been a lot of objections to this application online, mainly regarding the access and car parking. But as the planning officer pointed out, I mean, that's down to West Sussex. I can't really comment on whether the access is suitable or not, because you know, I'm not qualified to do that. I do think 12 and a half parking spaces, whilst West Sussex may think that's okay, I'm sure it will be okay. It isn't enough really for 5 properties, particularly in this position, because you can almost guarantee that's going to be a minimum of 2 cars per house. So that only needs 2.5 spaces. I'm not sure what the half space is for. Yeah, I guess it's for bikes or motorbike or something. But can we just go back to street lighting? I've read your report carefully about the biodiversity lighting and all the rest of it. And I just, you know, we really mustn't allow to have street lights in that close, because there is nowhere in any of the closes and in the new developments under the neighbourhood plan that have got street lighting. And I mean, that turns the rural into the urban immediately. So can we please say that we will not have any street lighting? I know people will individually put their own lights up, security lights and what have you, but that's not quite the same as a very, 15-foot pole, metre pole, whatever they are, with street lighting. So can we please say no to that?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. What I would advise is Condition 8 does ask for external lighting. We can be explicit to say that should not include column lighting, but I'm just sort of mindful that low-level bollard lighting, particularly for access in winter months, might be something the applicants want to put forward, and obviously that will have a low glow at low level and not cause light spillage into the wider area called biodiversity harm. So what we'll do in Condition 8 is just clarify no street column lighting.
I don't think any of the other closes have got lighting as you go in. But if the committee thinks that's suitable, well, so be it. But as long as we haven't got any column lighting within that development.
I think that's been noted. Councillor Belinda Walters.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just picking up on the security lighting, actually. I don't know whether, because security lighting, whilst it's got a timescale attached to it, sometimes it could be overridden. And my concern would be that I don't know whether we can put any sort of limitation on the strength of the security lighting. If you wanted a dark place for wildlife and whatnot, because in our street it's like a police beacon sometimes. We've got foxes and whatnot that set everything off. It's just a question whether that's something that can be considered.
Security lighting is always a difficult area, Councillor. People have sort of right to put it up for protecting their property, security, police, etc. I think certainly we can ask for details through the condition of anyone who wants to put it up, but I think ultimately it comes down to the sensibleness of the owners, etc. when putting up their security lighting.
Thank you.
Councillor Tricia Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we look at the ecology section? I remember this when this application came through once before. Councillor Bradnam pointed out the fact that there was a badger set actually on this site, and it doesn't stack up that we've said the applicant has submitted an updated and preliminary ecological appraisal survey, and following consultations with the council's ecologists, no objections to the proposal have been raised. Well, I'd like to know what's changed. What are we doing about the badger set that's on this site?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Condition 5 of the on the report is a pre-commencement condition relating to mitigation and enhancement in terms of biodiversity. Just referring back to our own ecologists' comments, they've said that given the dynamic nature of badgers, we recommend that an additional walkover is undertaken no less than 6 months prior to the start of works to assess if any badgers have recolonised on the site. This should be included in the biodiversity mitigation and enhancement strategy, which I've just mentioned that we've secured via condition. So before anything starts on site, at least 6 months before, we will require a walkover on the site to be undertaken in order to assess if there's any badgers that are now present. Thank you.
So if the walkover on the site identifies the fact that badgers are still in residence, what exactly is going to happen then?
If that is the case, then obviously the application that comes forward, so it will come forward as a discharge of condition. So we'll see the details and we'll consult with our ecologists and they will advise us accordingly of how to proceed in that instance.
Councillor Billy Greening.
Thank you. Can I just ask a case officer on condition 19? You said nearly all. Does that mean it's just classes G and H that wouldn't fall under and therefore be acceptable for permitted development?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Nobody else appears to want to speak, so I'll go back to the local member. If you've got any further comments, Councillor Bradnam.
Well, subject to the protection of the badgers, should they be there. But my understanding from reading the report is that at the moment there are not any badgers on site. Should they return, which I should think is extremely unlikely once the diggers move in, then obviously mitigation will have to be undertaken. But I would not. Well, I hope they don't start the site in next spring, because obviously that would be a very bad time. But subject to what we've discussed with the planning officer, then I'm happy for it to go ahead. Thank you.
Right, the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions, which will include badgers. I'll make sure on that. So could you all please vote? And yeah, yes, okay. Now to the vote. All those in favour to approve planning permission, please raise your hands. And those against? And any abstentions? No, unanimous. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8 has been withdrawn. So I will say, have a good evening, everybody. Thank you. Meeting's closed.
This